Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Today, we are going to be digging into some draft strategy that's popular in the draft streets right now. We're going to be talking zero RB. You may have seen that out there in the Twitterverse, and you might have heard the opposite end of that spectrum, the robust running back draft strategy. So we're going to get into both of those. Decide how Mario and I like to play those respective strategies out and weigh out if it's in a type of approach that you should be adopting as well. Let's start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. I'm John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Don't adjust your mobile devices or however you are watching the live stream. We are coming at you a little bit early this week because it's the 4th of July on Thursday, which is when we usually do this pod. So moved it up a little bit to get everything in and keep the content feed rocking this week. And Mario, we're into July, and every year it feels like football season and draft season, really it starts earlier. Best ball, we've been doing this since February, but it just kind of occurred to me yesterday that within this next week, I'll have done a Scott Fishbowl draft as well. I'm going to be in DC on Sunday for the Scott Fishbowl Live.
Nice.
Are you participating in the Scott Fishbowl this year?
I am not doing any live thing, but this is the reminder that I need to go make sure I'm not missing the draft or something. Okay, cool. I got 5 days. All right.
Okay. So you're set. We'll be drafting on the same day. But yeah, if any of our listeners are in the DC area and are looking to go to the Scott Fishbowl live event or are already signed up, hit me up. Again, I'm John McKechnie. But no real fishbowl content on this pod. Is just sort of a reminder, stuff is about to get real. We just started a RotoWire staff dynasty draft. We're in the first round of that. It's a super flex dynasty. So a lot of stuff outside the best ball realm kind of kicking in.
I did miss that, John. So it's I am on the clock in that one. So it's a good thing you reminded me of that. The dynasty draft. I mean, so much productivity already.
Yeah, no, it's only the July 2nd and we're already, rocking. I went ahead and took CJ Stroud with my first pick, number 4 overall in that one. Sorry.
Right. Oh no, I'm just like I just feel like an idiot, which happens enough. I don't need this draft doing it too, but we got the other kinds of drafts to talk about, don't we?
We do. But let's get into some strategy. So I think one of the more popular, prominent ones out there would be zero RB. Do you have kind of like a clean working definition of what that actually means for our audience?
Well, I think by now it can mean different things to different people a little bit, certainly between the theory of it and the practice of it. Like you got some people who adhere to it more than others for different reasons. But I think it's correct to say that the original person who put it forth was Sean Siegel.
Yes.
I think that's hope that's how you pronounce his name. Definitely one of the best fantasy football people ever. And I can't speak on his behalf, but it seems to me that his definition, his original theory of it, observations, were kind of pragmatic, and especially since this was like, I don't even remember, is this like 15 years ago that this had 10 years ago, something like that?
About 10 years
when at
ago.
the time 3 wide receiver was not necessarily the norm. PPR was not necessarily the norm. People took running backs in like 10 of the first 12 picks of fantasy drafts. And particularly, with backfields making their usage more horizontal, with more injuries at running back, with fewer teams feeding, lead workhorse runners, those early 2000s type prices didn't make much sense. And there's been a big correction in recent years, of course, too. But at the time, basically, it was just, the running backs were so expensive that their injury risk was not at all factored in to the prices. And you could, especially over volume, win a lot by just taking receivers at a lot of the points where other people were taking running backs. And if only because you weren't getting injured as much, you would come out ahead. And as the league's, throwing more and better all the time, that all those dynamics kind of amplified each other, I think. And now it's, of course, especially on Underdog or something like that, there's a very big cultural change from 10, 15 years ago. On Underdog, it's like it's just zero running back is the norm, I would say. Like there's or at least the near norm. There's of course people who are taking those running backs. It's not like Breece Hall falls to the second round or anything. But it's just to say, like, there's no way a player like Marvin Harrison would be going 12th overall, back then. And there's no way like, Malik Neighbors going 20th or something, whatever he is. This kind of stuff is evidence of a lot of people using the zero running back approach. And the way you do it successfully is basically, you nail your receiver picks and you do big damage with your receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks to a lesser extent. And you still try to have your cake and eat it too by poaching running back points. You're not forfeiting the category of running back points by going zero running back. It's more like you can have a big lead at receiver and still pick up a lot of, especially the backups to injured starters at running back and get those points too. So that's why you see a lot of people on Underdog going into the, 8th, 9th round with one or no running backs. And then they'll might take like 4 in the next 5 rounds. And it's all, they're targeting guys who are backups to otherwise productive starters who might get hurt, basically. And I think you can say too that the more zero running back works in a year correlates to the more injuries among the typically productive starting running backs.
Right. So like a couple of years ago when Josh Jacobs ran away with like the rushing title, if I remember correctly, there's a bunch of running back injuries, and therefore like the theory was proven correct for that particular season. It doesn't, of course, always work out that way. But yeah, I mean, it does feel like that has become the standard approach. Like I think at the very least, as far as like optimal builds are concerned, a lot of the times the conventional wisdom in today's best ball market, especially over on Underdog, is like if you don't have 4 receivers by the time that you make the 7th or you're making your 7th selection, you could be kind of putting yourself behind the 8 ball. But I do just kind of wonder aloud if everyone's doing the same strategy, could we see like almost like a reversal of fortune, the way that, Sean kind of foresaw things years ago when it was so running back heavy through the first half of these drafts. And then he's like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and grab myself a bunch of receivers.
I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine it. I think it's more just subject to the running back health level, durability level league wide. And if guys aren't missing snaps, aren't missing starts at running back, that's pushing the margins a little bit more. It's stressing, the premises of the zero running back theory at that point. So if all of like, Jonathan Taylor, B. John, Breece Hall, Christian McCaffrey stay healthy all year, it could very well be the kind of thing where, zero running back would still be a viable strategy, just because if you draft well, if you execute the theory well, it's, you can do a lot worse approach wise. But yeah, I think there's still a possibility that if those running backs who can give you those 30, 35 point weeks, if they exist as a category at all, the way that they did, whatever, 10, 15 years ago, when, at one time you'd have LaDainian Tomlinson, Priest Holmes, Amon Green, somebody else that I'm probably like Tiki Barber, putting up ungodly numbers. If there exists a running back of that category, you really want to have that running back on your team. And it's just kind of been a long time since that sort of environment, be it because of, league usage trends or, some combination of league usage trends, or just the best running backs at a given time missing time with injury, or the lockout in Taylor's case last year. But yeah, I mean, if Taylor plays 17 games, if Hall, Robinson, McCaffrey play 15, 17 games, then there might be some people who wish they hadn't gone so in harmony with the markets on especially Underdog, because yeah, it's like if if it turns out that if there was like inflation in play, you're just gonna kind of wish you sat it out, and it's possible. It's just not it's not the bet a lot of people are making right now.
In the just kind of general market right now, like I have a draft board pulled up from I want to say within this past week, and really there are 6 running backs to go in the first 2 rounds reliably at this point. So yeah, the shift has completely happened, and the rest of the players that go in the first 2 rounds are receivers. We don't have the first round tight end like we did a year ago with Travis Kelce or anything like that. So it's just running back, receiver in the early going. And I think to draw on what you were saying about how running backs profile for fantasy value these days, it's not an exact parallel, but I think it's kind of similar to in baseball, where aces, like true aces, are drying up for the most part. Like there aren't the guys that you can reliably project for 200 plus innings, 200 plus strikeouts, and well into the double digits as far as the win column is concerned either. And you just kind of attack the starting pitching market by going volume. I think our old pal Derek Van Riper and Eno Saris say, like, you have the spaghetti and you're just going to throw it at the wall and you see what sticks as far as that goes. And I think that applies a little bit when it comes to just thinking through the zero running back approach. As far as your gut is concerned, like when you're starting out a draft and you've got a few receivers under your belt, like what's your kind of threshold generally when it comes to taking the plunge on your first running back? If you are going that receiver heavy approach early on, do you wait until the 7th round like some of my fellow drafters did in this one? Or I think I might know the answer given our Josh Jacobs discussions, but if he's there on the board for you in the 5th, are you just like, all right, I'm doing this? Where do you kind of stand on it generally?
Yeah, so I think there are some people who pretty much draft zero running back as a matter of like hard line principle. Like they just subscribe to it unconditionally, and like they're going to do it no matter what. I don't see it that way. I think you should put it up to like a pragmatic consideration of just how many points do I expect these players to score, and so that approach still leads me to do, even though I don't set out to do it on purpose, I still use a zero running back type strategy a lot because sometimes I'll be on the clock and I'm like, I hate these running backs, or I like this receiver more than I like the remaining running backs, etc. It happens all the time. So I don't know what scenarios exactly those happen. I guess one way it happened recently is I can't remember what pick. It was like the 8th or the 9th or the 10th, maybe the 11th. But I ended up in this situation, I almost always end up going some combination of Garrett Wilson, Jonathan Taylor. But this time, because I had already had enough Jonathan Taylor exposure, I went with Drake London, Garrett Wilson, and those two having the same bye week played into it a little bit. But for some reason, I didn't feel like I didn't even look, for more than a second at running backs until the 5th round. When Jacobs and Pacheco become considerations for me. But yeah, one thing I'll just say about the zero running back thing, I think a lot of people fail to meet this kind of request. Don't like get into it and in the process become incurious about running backs. Like some people just like write off running backs as a category and trivialize, mock it. But if you really want to do zero running back correctly, you still have to do a good job of recognizing where the productive running backs might be. And I definitely think in Jacobs' case, that's an instance of people just following a silly premise, overextending it at the very least, because there's like 5 picks between Josh Jacobs and James Cook on a half-point PPR site. That's completely insane.
I agree. I think that the way that I would do it, the most extreme I think I tend to get with it would be waiting for like the middle of the 6th round and making Joe Mixon my running back one. That's about as far
I did
as
that,
I
I
go.
think, in this draft that I'm talking about, actually. I might have missed out on Jacobs, but yeah, it's Jacobs and Mixon. It's like these guys are going to play 600, 700 snaps in offenses that we expect to be among the league leader for points. And you see in a guy like Kyron Williams going 2 rounds earlier than either of them, sometimes 3. they're projecting more usage for a guy who weighs 30 pounds, 35 pounds less than these other two, and these other two who are getting paid like 15 times as much as him. So stuff like that you got to spot. So for instance, I don't really consider Kyron Williams as good of a way of doing the zero running back thing, or a running back skeptic kind of lineup as I do guys like Jacobs and Mixon, who are going to play a lot on teams that will score points, or we expect to anyway.
Yeah, I think that those are like two good foundational, like kind of building blocks of analysis.
And Pacheco, I guess, similarly.
Yeah, Pacheco just continues to be kind of slept on in the market. I feel like him going in the mid fourth, that's a really nice spot to target your first running back if you wanted to go with this approach. But I feel like a little bit less about ETN. I might have like just a more running back or have a running back driven build or have a premium tight end ahead of him, kind of mix things up a little bit. But, Pacheco, Jacobs, and Mixon in the fourth, fifth, or sixth rounds stand out to me as the guys that you can target pretty reliably and feel good about their workload projections and, ultimate production within those great offenses and still be able to nail the early round receivers on top of it. Before we get on to our next talking point, we got a message from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. You just pick more or less on two or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. In fact, Mario is putting some practice to what we're preaching here. I created a Prize Picks slip just minutes before we jumped on the stream here. So for tonight, there's a discount on Tariq Skubal. I think that's the Taco Tuesday one. 4.5 strikeouts for him. I think he can get that over. And I also got one for, let's see, it took the under on Courtney Williams's points, rebounds, and assists in the WNBA. And then whoever the A's pitcher is, I took the under on his total outs recorded for tonight. So that's my slip. Tail at your own risk, but I am using RotoWire's Prize Picks tool, which is very nifty. Can't recommend it enough. So that's what I got for this evening's slate over on Prize Picks. Prize Picks has quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of player and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. As we kind of conclude the zero RB section here, it's hard to get it totally wrong in the first two rounds, but are there any like obvious targets or fades in your mind at the receiver position in the third and fourth round that you're kind of hard line about?
Mostly just Neighbors, I guess, and that's especially the case on Underdog. I can imagine Malik Neighbors having a season kind of like what Garrett Wilson had last year, and which is to say, 100 catches, and it still just feels awful at the end.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be Daniel Jones had what people call like one good year, when they're like, see how good he is. We told you all this time he was good. He threw 15 touchdowns that year. So if good Daniel Jones throws 15 touchdowns, and even if we generously say, well, Malik Neighbors would make good Daniel Jones throw 20, it's like, okay, that's still a thin margin to be playing with a guy who goes around. What is it? Neighbors. I feel like I've seen him go ahead of like Debo, and certainly ahead of he usually goes ahead of DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs. I will not partake in that.
No, I won't either. So yeah, Neighbors is not my cup of tea on Underdog at the very least. DJ Moore is probably my favorite third round receiver. It can be a little bit.
I take him in the second all the time. I guess I got to stop. I'm like subsidizing this crap ADP that everyone else is benefiting from.
I'm mostly staying away from Devontae Smith, DK Metcalf. I can't get on board with Zay Flowers in the third. I can't really get on board with Tank Dell in the third either. But
I will say I do find myself, when I do go zero running back out of practical reasons, I do consider guys like Flowers and Dell just because you're all in on the premise of absolutely killing it at receiver, and so you do need like mega firepower at receiver. You can't go kind of okay at receiver and do zero running back.
That is a good like kind of reminder, because it just like my other kind of draft instincts kick in, my player eval and other stuff, and it can be running a little bit counter to the theory of the zero RB, but you do just kind of need to stockpile and remind yourself of that, and you are going to be getting talented receivers and at least reasonably good offenses for the most part through the first 4 to 5 rounds. Uncle Ted throws out some zero RB targets of his, so guys that he's drafting late at the running back spot to kind of help fill out his roster. Kamani Vidal, we can definitely co-sign that one. Zach Moss, Rico Dowdle, Chase Brown, and Jawar Jordan. Interesting. I feel like you can probably get him with your last pick fairly routinely.
Yeah, I've never seen him get picked. But yeah, I like the Cincinnati guys both. I'll sometimes try to get both of them on a best ball team.
That's not a bad approach. I've definitely over leveraged my Chase Brown exposure relative to my Zach Moss one, but I feel pretty good about both of them. I could see that ultimately, kind of working into a committee that ends up being frustrating, but you don't really have that issue if you have both of them, especially if you've kind of stockpiled the rest of your positions and also have another running back that you can kind of tether yourself to a bit. Let's go on the other end of the spectrum here and talk about a more robust running back strategy. So as the name implies, it really, and again, like we've been talking about, the zero RB or receiver heavy approach is the current style. The current fantasy football literature points you in that direction. But I respect the idea of just having a pretty awesome backfield and trying to nail your receiver picks a little bit later on. How often do you kind of go with this approach in today's draft world? And where do you kind of need to? I feel like it is pick specific. Like if you have a later first round draft slot, I think it's more excusable to go with a running back heavy approach. But how do you feel about it?
Well, I guess I don't even know for sure what the definition of robust running back would be. I guess especially like the zero running back people, not particularly high running back picks would still constitute like robust by their standards, because they'd be like, oh my God, you took 2 in the first 7 rounds. This is robust running back run amok. But I guess if I was setting the definition, I'd imagine basically a roster where you're aiming to have at least 2 killer starting running backs and your flex spot probably a running back 2, and ideally someone who's closer to a running back 2 than a running back 3. Like you're trying to get 2 25-30 point workhorses and another guy who's at the very least like explosive or gives you regular touchdowns, something like that. And I think even in this era of zero running back evangelizing, I think a lot of people can admit that, oh, well, yeah, when you have a running back who is a workhorse and they're really good, of course that's more than a receiver can do, because a running back a really good starting running back will run for more yards than these receivers will have receiving yards. It's only the points for the receptions that makes the receivers similarly high scoring as the running backs. So especially like McCaffrey, him being the way he was last year, that's aside from Taylor's, I guess, 1,800 yard year, that was the closest we've gotten lately to those old days of LT, whatever, Priest Holmes, Tiki Barber kind of guys. So if you can get a McCaffrey, and if Jonathan Taylor in the same year is going for 1,800 yards, a team that somehow had both of those guys would probably do some steamrolling. But more realistically, you're probably looking at something like because robust running back, I think you're like talking first round running back pick. I almost don't think you can do the strategy this year without taking one of McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, or Jonathan, maybe Jahmyr Gibbs, especially in full point PPR. So Yeah, I think those guys, if you're not picking one of them with your first pick or at least a top like 14 pick, you're basically not doing robust running back, and that's fine. I don't actually think it's a particularly viable strategy. I think because even if you're taking these killer running backs at the top, especially in best ball, you're probably going a little thinner at running back. So the word robust, it's like you kind of feel like there'd be volume in play, but somewhat paradoxically, if you're paying a ton at running back, you wouldn't want to have many running backs on your roster. You'd want, especially in like the underdog tournaments, the big tournaments, if you're going like really killer running backs at your 2-3 top spots to the point that you're projecting those 3 guys to start pretty much every week, if it goes right, you might want to stop at 4 running backs and then, spam volume at receiver. Either way, if you're trying to go running back, 2 of your first 3 picks, you're going to need to, in best ball, you can get away with kind of like spamming volume, I think, and getting nice values around the ADP. But in redraft, it's a little tougher. It's like you at the very least are going to have to try to kind of like pick sleepers correctly every week. You'll have to be rotating starters, and in redraft, that's not very much fun at receiver. So I would not do robust running back much or at all these days, and I would keep it limited to best ball.
So yeah, I definitely agree on that, mostly just being a best ball type of approach. But what I have found in this particular draft that I'm looking at, essentially, I just tried to penalize the room for letting talent fall at the running back position. For instance, I got Saquon Barkley with the 10th pick of the second round, and I turned around and I got Devin Achane with the 3rd pick of the 3rd round. And I didn't go into that draft expecting to do that necessarily. But, when I'm posed with the question of, do I take Saquon? Nico Collins has just gone off the board. Do I take Saquon or Mike Evans, Malik Neighbors, or Devontae Smith, or DK Metcalf? The answer is I'll take Saquon and try my luck elsewhere. And it was a kind of similar feeling with taking Achane. I suppose in hindsight, I a lot of the times I would have taken DJ Moore. But
I actually just had to force myself to not take DJ Moore and take Achane either yesterday or 2 days ago.
It can be tough to fade DJ Moore in the 3rd round, but Achane has pretty unbelievable upside as well. So with that in mind, I didn't take another running back until the 11th round when I took Blake Corum. Later on, I took Nick Chubb and Chuba Hubbard, and that's my running back room.
Hey, speaking of going back to zero running back for a moment, I think people should really be looking at Chuba Hubbard to be doing that, because that's guy who I take him in the 13th, and when I'm in drafts, because I'm always worried someone might know that I'm going to take him in the 14th if I don't take him in the 13th. But as far as that 12 rounds or later category and guys who are going to basically start, it's I guess like him and Brian Robinson, and honestly, I think Brian Robinson is more likely to get benched this year than Hubbard, and Hubbard goes like 2 rounds later.
Yeah, I have a lot of Hubbard. I've definitely am drinking the Kool-Aid as far as his prospects for this year are concerned. I feel like other late round running backs, we both like Ray Davis. I'm starting to kind of come around on Bucky Irving.
I'm not. I think he has ability, but the tools are just so basement level that I think he's going to basically get Chase Edmonds's snap count from last year, which is to say like 15 snaps a game. I think he's going to be the Jaleel McLaughlin or something, which Irving really knows how to play, but there's only so much knowing how to play can do for you when you're 192 and have basically just bad athleticism across the board. So, but yeah, if Rachaad White were to miss time, I guess in that case, Irving might be playing something like 30 snaps. I just, as a prospect, I'm not even convinced Irving's better than like a Sean Tucker or whatever. So I basically am high on Rachaad White this year if he stays healthy, because I don't know who else they're going to give the ball, but yeah, Irving knows how to run, and he can catch.
With White, it's just like, what's their appetite for another year of like getting 3.5 yards per carry from their only running back? Like,
I just think the way that the way that you reduce White is just kind of giving draws to Irving and screen passes to Irving, which can get you again to like a Jaleel McLaughlin 15 snap kind of role. I just don't know how much it can scale up, but I don't know. I guess Irving could catch something like, I don't know, best case scenario, maybe like 40 catches or something like that. But I think it would take White being held to something like 500 or fewer snaps personally. But
maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I
the
was
thing is,
working on.
You don't really need to believe the players are good or whatever to get, you know, some production out of them. Like there's been enough complete, you know, nobodies who stumble into opportunity and do something, and then Irving's not a nobody. He's just kind of like a fringe prospect to me.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, you know, for someone that was probably inside my top 5 running back rankings before the combine, definitely wasn't afterward. But I just am enough of a skeptic of Rachaad White, I suppose, to where it's like if Irving ends up being the running back too, I'm willing to at least, you know, throw a couple shares in.
I mean, he's
his
cheap
direction.
enough that it's like negligible either way. It doesn't really matter. But I probably prefer guys like Dobbins, Elijah Mitchell. I'm hoping to nail a couple teams where I get both Mitchell and Guerrero, because Guerrero for some reason goes like undrafted all the time. But yeah, we're talking, you know, bottom of the haystack either way by that point.
Right. Yeah. These are late round guys. Mitchell, 17th round ADP, and like you said, Guerrero, not a guarantee to be drafted in these 18 round best balls. But going back to robust running back for a moment, I mean, I feel like we've kind of just set the stage as far as that's concerned, where, you know, you really are going to be putting yourself behind the 8 ball, and you're going to need to kind of nail your next glut of receiver picks and wait a while for your next running backs to hit or running backs to be selected. So it puts you in a bit of a precarious spot. I'd say it's probably not a strategy to overemploy, but again, like if there are obvious values to be had, like in this case with Saquon and HN both going, you know, a decent bit past their normal ADP, you know, I think as long as you have your receiver targets in mind, you can pull it off. It's just a thinner margin for error.
Yeah, and I guess I real quickly want to mention for redraft, I would use the same, you know, or actually, I guess in redraft there's something to be said for having depth just in case the injuries do strike. But yeah, if you're doing a robust running back kind of thing in best ball, I would keep it limited to the tournaments, and you might as well. You should try to find a way to make your bye weeks line up so that you don't need to go 5 running backs, because you really might need that extra shot at receiver or wherever.
Yeah, that's well said. So always be mindful of your bye week distribution. You don't want to be like running out there like week 14, for example, has a lot of really good teams. So you want a lot of players from those teams, but you don't want a ton of overlap at the same time. So I think like off the top of my head, like the Texans, the Bengals, and the Ravens are all off on week 14. So like little things like that to keep in mind. Before we get into a little bit of Hero RB and some roster construction to round out the show, we do have a message from our friends over at Fantrax. Is there something you wish your fantasy league had, or features that are missing from your current leagues? Bonus scoring, custom schedules or playoffs, deeper team settings? Well, look no further, because we have you covered with our friends over at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. They're also really the only game in town when it comes to college fantasy football, and I'm thankful for that, because they do an awesome job with that super deep player pool and really intuitive user experience there. Fantrax even offers I spoiled it. Fantrax even offers college fantasy football leagues, so we're on the same wavelength, copywriter. Create or join a fantasy football commissioner league. Invite your friends and dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top dynasty fantasy football platform in the industry. Coming from another service? Not a problem. Fantrax can easily import any of your current leagues and rosters. Ever have a trade go wrong or make a mistake in dropping a player? Fantrax commissioner tools allow you to undo any move with one simple click. Fantrax is running a special promotion you don't want to miss. Sign up for free at fantrax.com/RotoWire today to enter for your chance to win tickets to any regular season NFL game for you and your entire league, plus $6,000 in spending cash. That's right. Tickets for you and your entire league. Simply create a new league or bring over your existing leagues for more chances to win. Just go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. All right, so we'll find the sort of proverbial Goldilocks strategy between these two sort of extreme ones. That would be the hero running back. So I think to define that properly, you take a running back within the first 2 rounds, and then you leave that market alone, I would say, until probably the 7th or 8th round. I think once you get to that range, someone like a James Conner or DeAndre Swift are my favorite type of picks. But I think or the other on how the Pittsburgh backfield is going to shake out, or if you just like both Harris and Warren for this year, I think that those guys are both viable. Devin Singletary, you're not in love with it. You're not in love with getting exposure to that offense, but I think you could do worse for his projected volume.
Sometimes guys like him are kind of the answer to like what was the best value in this, 15 pick range.
No, completely. So it's he's not fun. It's not like it's gonna always take you over the top, but like I think he'll be like that consistent floor type of performer to where if you do incur some injuries elsewhere in your backfield, you're not completely sunk, because Singletary, as it stands, I think really does have like a pretty clear path to being that top running back for the Giants. I'm not buying Tyrone Tracy, for example. Might grab like a share or 2 of Eric Gray in the 18th, but I did some more digging on Tyrone Tracy, and I'm not quite there.
Yeah, Singletary is going to be playing, I think, at least 30 snaps every week. The question I would imagine is whether he plays up to 45, and the difference being if he's pushing 45, he's playing a lot of passing down snaps, and if he's not, I guess that means Tracy took the passing down snaps, or maybe some waiver claim at the final cut downs or whatever else. But I think Brian Daboll sees a need for stability and just kind of something that he knows what to expect with in this Giants offense without Saquon. And I think Singletary is how he's, it's going to be his safety blanket, basically.
I think so too. So, keep that in mind for your later guys. But is this a type of approach that you do often? Is it another thing where it's a little bit draft slot dependent, where it's like, okay, like Amon-Ra St. Brown just went off the board. I have a shot at either Bijan or Breece Hall, and I'd rather take my chances with them than, say, A.J. Brown or Puka Nacua.
So for me, it's always just subject to how the board unfolds and kind of what I expect the other people to draft like. So slot and the behavior of the other people drafting can influence it. I guess just off the top of my head, the time that I'm most likely to try a hero RB kind of thing is when maybe it's McCaffrey at 1 or 2 or whatever, he might go at, because it's kind of hard to go running back right away after you wait so long from the first pick or the second pick, whatever it is that you might get McCaffrey at. Otherwise, the most likely case would be, I think, when I start Jonathan Taylor, Garrett Wilson, or Puka Nacua, Jonathan Taylor, whatever. Taylor kind of build right there, and then sometimes I won't take another running back until it's probably James Conner. I probably have way too much James Conner. I got to look at that. But I find myself taking Conner quite a lot, and it's usually as a running back 3. But the times that I've gotten him as a running back 2, it felt like I was kind of threading the needle, because I was like, Conner can finish as a running back 1 easily when he's healthy. Like most weeks, he's capable of that. So yeah, he's probably going to miss some time, but if my running back 1, be it McCaffrey, Taylor, Bijan, whatever it is, if they're rolling, and if Conner just crushes a couple months for me, and if I nail my receiver picks, whatever other picks there might be, then all you need is a couple other running backs on hand at most at a given time to just pitch in little bits over the weeks.
No, completely. And to your point there on Conner, he's my 3rd most drafted running back at 26 percent exposure. My number one is this will make you proud, Chuba at 36.
Nice. Chuba also might be my top exposure at running back, but I don't know. I might have to slow myself there, but I'm also expecting people to look a little more lucidly at that situation, and I expect Hubbard to push more like the 12th round or something like that within like a month from now. So I hope so. Anyway, I've got I like my 14th, 15th round shares, but I'd also like to see the field have to chase them a little bit instead of me ending up with like 80% exposure because it was such a good deal.
Yeah. Yeah, the bargain hunter.
Nice bargain, beware. God says as he snaps poor Chuba's femur in half. Obviously, I hope this doesn't happen. I've got money on the line here.
Several dollars here. And then kind of rounding it out, as far as your roster construction is concerned, say it's an 18-round draft on Underdog. How are you allocating your resources? Are you getting 7 receivers, 8 receivers, 9 receivers every time? And how does that play?
I really don't know, and I don't mean to speak with any authority on it because I really don't know how much we can know these things. You'll see there's well-written articles that various analysts have about, the advance rates, the cash rates, the winning rates of various roster builds year to year in best ball. But there's usually a little bit of fluctuation. And even in the cases where it's like one particular build outpaced the others, it's not necessarily proof that it was the smarter one. It might have been like the luckier one, So to me, though, it's also subject to how much you're projecting point wise for your other positions. Like I'm more likely to go 2 quarterback rather than 3 if I feel like I got 2 30-point quarterbacks on my roster. But if I don't really feel strongly about my quarterbacks, then that makes me more likely to spend a third round spot on a quarterback. But if I'm imagining a default build for me, the most common build for me, it's either, what is it? It's like 2 quarterbacks, 5 running back, maybe 6 running backs. But yeah, I guess I bounce between 2 to 3 quarterbacks, 5 to 6 running backs, because I am not doing robust running back. If I was trying the robust running back thing, I'd have some like 4 running back lineups. And receiver, I'll be, I think, at least 7, sometimes 9, but more likely 8. I've seen plenty of people with experience badges on Underdog doing 4 running back, 10 receiver all the time. I haven't, but it's not because I have any idea about whether it makes sense. It's just it's not in my inclination when I'm looking at the list of players I can pick from to end up doing that.
It's a tricky dance, and like you said, depending on how much capital you spend in the early part, as far as running back is concerned, it should kind of have an impact on how many you're going to end up with, and then you're able to fill in the rest of your roster. I feel like just last year I have a little bit of scar tissue from 2 quarterback builds where the rest of the team had legs, but Aaron Rodgers is done for the season after one play, or Kirk Cousins gets hurt, but those respective teams got blown up, or I'm having to rely on just Trevor Lawrence the rest of the way, and he obviously had the disappointing season. So
2 quarterback. I should have said 3 quarterback is probably what you should do when you're not in like a big tournament. The 2 quarterback thing is more like big tournament brain thinking, because you're asking yourself the somewhat unlikely question of like, what if they're both healthy all year and they just kick ass constantly? And it's right. Yeah, it's not likely to happen, but if it does, and you somehow have the courage and wherewithal to forego that 3rd quarterback spot and spend it on a bargain at receiver who comes through in the playoffs or something, it's just it can sway a lot, but so can having 1 quarterback active for 9 weeks of the season. That's a good way to tank a team too.
Yeah, and I'm living proof of that. There's some teams that could have gone to glory if not for my quarterback injuries last year, but there are tons of ways to attack the quarterback spot, and I think we'll save that for another podcast as far as your roster builds when it comes to quarterbacks. and tight ends. But we I think have covered
2
nicely
to 3. That's it.
how to approach your running backs and receivers, especially in best ball for this year. But that's going to round it out for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Big thanks to our sponsors over at Blue Wire, over at Prize Picks, and over at Fantrax. Everyone have a safe and fun 4th of July, and we'll catch you on the other side of the holiday. Thanks for listening.